Hi, this is Elizabeth with Felted Sky Studio, here with the instructions for our Easter eggs needle felting kit. So there are just a couple of things you'll want to have on hand before you begin, and the most important is a foam mat for needle felting. So this is the one we carry, but any foam will do. You just want to make sure that it is dense enough and thick enough so that your needle is not going to go through it. And also you don't want your wool getting so caught up in the mat. You might also want to get out some eggs and an egg carton. So if you have any real eggs in your house or want to get some, this will help when you're sculpting and shaping your eggs. If you're a visual person and just want to make them as realistic as possible, I find that it helps me to have a carton and some eggs. Alright, so let's open up the kit and we'll talk about what's inside. Alright, so we have 3 types of wool in here. So this, the pretty colored stuff, is called roving. So that's what our supplier calls this that makes it, and that's what we're going to call it, but you might find other names for it online, such as top. So there are other names for this fiber preparation, but it's usually more of a rope-like and has a bit of a twist to it. This is on the thinner side for a roving. Online you might find some thicker rovings, but we like this one a lot and use it in many of our kits. So in here we also have this cream colored one. Is called core wool. So this is what is a batting or a carded bat or felting bat, and it's called core wool in needle felting because we like to put this at the core of our project, so on the inside. So usually core wool is a little bit less expensive than the pretty colored stuff that we would put on the outside, and so we use it on the inside if we're doing anything a little bit bigger. And then we also have some other batting or felting bat in this kit. So we just have this white because we want the eggs to look a little more white before we decorate them. And then let's talk briefly about the needles. So you can pull them out of their foam board. They're in here just because it keeps them safe so they don't get bent or broken, and also to keep you and any pets and children safe. So these are very sharp and they definitely hurt if you poke yourself, and you don't want to leave them just lying around. So you can either store them back in the foam board, or another option is to poke them all the way into your mat. So that's another good thing to do with them. So in this kit we have the black, which is a 36 triangle, and the yellow, which is the 40 triangle. And in kind of a shorthand we just say 36T and 40T. So in needle felting there are different gauges of needles. So this just gives you the opportunity to try different ones. They all do things, the felting just slightly differently, and it's kind of good just to, you'll get the feel for the difference in the needles just by using them. Alright, and the last thing is just to talk about the instruction sheet. So here on the front we have all of the colors, so as we're going along in the kit I will reference the colors, and so you can find them here on the front as well as the needles if you forget which is which. And then on the steps on the instruction sheet, they're all numbered, and there's also these extra little numbers next to the 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s. So that is the timestamp for the video. So I definitely recommend following along with the video. Obviously you have found it if you're watching this. So with the timestamp you can just fast forward or reverse, so backwards and forwards to whatever part you would like to watch. So you don't even have to watch the whole thing, or if you want to see a step again you can just go back to that timestamp. Alright, so now I think we're ready to begin. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get our roll of core wool, and we're going to prepare our egg shapes for felting. So unwind your wool, and there may be some extra pieces, and we will probably be using those. And if it's just one big piece, what we're going to do first is start tearing a piece off for our egg, and we want it to be about the size of the egg. So we get one of the ones I've prepared beforehand. So we want it to be about as wide or as tall as our egg. And you can even get out a real egg and use that to help you with your sizing and your shaping. So we're going to tear into the wool, and then we're going to get a strip, and then we're going to start rolling. So this is how we're going to make the egg shape, is doing a roll. So I'm just going to go ahead and tear the rest of the strip so we have a long piece to work with. And we might find that we don't need all of this, but at least we'll have it if we need it, ready to go. So start rolling. I want this to be fairly tight, but it doesn't have to be super tight. And once it gets to be about this rolled, we want to thin out and get more wool around the middle so that our egg will be fatter around the middle and nicely rounded. So you can pull a little bit, kind of thin out the strip and make it rounder in the center. So think about your egg shape, and this might be a little bit too much wool, and back it off just a little bit. So you want to tinker around with your rolls until you feel like you have the amount of wool that's going to make a nice egg shape. So you want it to be just slightly bigger when it's in the roll than what your finished egg will be, because the felting is going to shrink it down a little bit, but it's not going to shrink it down too much. So we need a nice egg shape. So here's another piece, and you can just start the next roll. So I would recommend rolling the rolls for all of your eggs in the beginning before you start any of the felting, and that way you can make sure you have enough wool for each of them. We're going to be doing 6 eggs. So just keep tearing strips, and there you see that I had a smaller strip and I needed to add on a little bit. So I just pulled off another one and continued adding some more wool. So we don't want the rolls to get lengthened out too much. You want to keep them compact and egg shaped. So here are 2 rolls. So we just need to continue on getting our rolls prepared so that we make sure we have enough wool for each of them and they're all pretty even. So we don't want any of the eggs to be bigger than the others. We want to try and get them all the same size. So we need about the same amount of wool in each of them. So I'm going to speed up the video now and just continue on with the rolling so that you can see a little bit more of that, but it will go faster, and then we'll see how our rolls look at the end and how even they are. Alright, so here we go with that. Alright, I'm to the end of my wool, and my last egg is definitely not as big as my first. My first two have a little too much wool, I can see now. We are not really even in our shape. So at this point, I will take and unroll a little bit from the first two and add it on to my last egg. So this is good to do in the beginning because you can just kind of see where you might have a little too much and where there's not quite enough. So you want to squeeze your eggs and kind of make sure they all feel very similarly in terms of the amount of wool in each one. I think I did perhaps need a little of that in that one. This one also feels a bit like it's got a bit too much. So these are pretty good here. So just kind of tinker around until you have them feeling about the same to you when you squeeze them and when you look at them. Alright, there we have it. Now these seem pretty even to me in terms of rolling. So now we're ready to pick one and we'll start the felting. So since they're all about the same, we'll go with this one. So place your roll on the mat, and actually before you do that, even look at the ends, and we want our eggs, let me get one that I've already done. So similar to a real egg, we want to pick what's going to be the bottom and then what's going to be the top. So the bottom to me is a little bit wider and a little bit flatter, and the top tapers just a little bit to a bit more of a point. So again, get out an egg from your refrigerator if you need to look at an egg, or even a plastic egg like leftover from Easter, just to have on hand if you need to, have something to visualize while you are, or even compared to while you're felting, so that you can get your shaping good. So this I'm going to pick as my bottom. It seems a little bit wider to me. So let's start with the bottom. So we're going to place our roll down on the mat, and then we're going to be using our black tipped needle. So this is our 36 triangle. We're using this to do the sculpting for this beginning part. So just take your needle and we're going to start poking into the wool at the bottom. So I should also mention, be very careful of your other fingers. So anytime you're sculpting and doing anything 3D, there's definitely the potential to poke yourself, unintentionally of course, but you want to try and keep your fingers well away from the needle and be, very conscious of where you're poking the needle in to try and keep it away from your fingers. So inevitably you will probably poke yourself. It happens to all of us, but as you go on, you'll probably be able to do it less and less, and hopefully you won't get too many pokes. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start poking into the bottom of our egg. So we want to kind of round it out. So the way that you sculpt when you're needle felting, it all has to do with the angle of your needle and how you are poking the needle in. So wherever you poke, that's going to push the wool in and start to felt it. So there's actually these little teeny tiny barbs on the end of the needle, which are hard to see. But those little teeny tiny barbs are enough to get the wool fibers to tangle together and shrink down. So that's what felting means. And so we can sculpt with the needle. And again, it has to do with the angle that we're pushing the wool and how much we poke each area. So in general, we want to go all around our little sculpture, our little egg sculpture here. And we don't want to do any one area too much to begin with. We want to poke very evenly all around to work on our sculpting. So you can see that I've already gotten the bottom started. So see, we're poking all around, and I'm kind of moving the angle of the needle to work on the roundedness. And some of this is just practice and feel of how to do that sculpting. So we have 6 eggs to work on in this kit. And so this is a really good kit to do, to just practice making the same shape over and over. And if your first egg is not perfect, you have 5 other ones to work on. Alright, so we've done this end, and that's probably enough for now. So let's switch to the other side. And it's like our roll is coming unrolled a bit. So you can also see where it's supposed to be folded over on itself, and we could kind of tack it down. So just poke in on the edge of the wool where the roll ended. And then to do this side, it's a little bit hard to see on the video, but we can even take the needle and pull the wool into the center to kind of help get this started at this end. So you can see there, I'm going to take any wool that's kind of hanging out there and just pull it into the center and poke it. So that can help start the shaping on this end. So again, hopefully you can see that. Pull the wool where we want it to go and then poke it. So then as we're doing this end, we want to try and keep, a little bit of that pointy, a little bit pointier than the other side. It's not really going to be a point, but it's just tapered a little more. So we're going to poke kind of in a, so up from the middle of the egg, and then as I head up towards the tip, you can see I'm changing the angle of the needle a little bit. And then when we're going in down here, kind of angling towards the center, so that's going to keep some of this wool pushed toward the center to make sure it stays rounded. So you can see I'm turning the egg and just poking a little bit in each section, again angling towards the center so that we keep the wool moving towards the middle. And if we just poke on the middle without doing that first, we would start to get an egg that's just too long and not staying round in the middle. So it would be flattening out too much. And you can hold it up on the mat, sitting it on its bottom, and then you can poke gently down. We don't want to poke on the center too much. This can be more gentle poking right now, but you can poke a little bit from the top so you can see where it needs to be poked down and rounded out. You can see we have this little lumpy part there, so if we poke there, the wool will compress in. And now we've kind of smoothed out that little lump that was there. So wherever you poke, the wool is going to push in at that point. So we start out bigger, and as we continue felting, the whole thing is just going to shrink down and firm up. So it won't be as squishy, it will become more solid as we go along. So now I'm heading more into the middle a little bit. So again, still thinking about our egg shape and pushing wool from the ends towards the middle, but then we can go in a little straighter on the middle itself. And start to felt that middle a little bit. So I'll kind of do this for each section. So poke and turn, poke and turn. Alright, now this would be a good time to turn back over, and we'll work back on the other end a little bit and up towards the middle. We don't want any lumpy parts, and we don't want any parts that are more felted than the rest, that are too concave and like where we've made a little crater, so to speak. So we want to just poke very evenly as we're going here. Just try and make everything as smoothed out as possible. And always just continuing to work on the shape. So you can compare as we're working to, again, an Easter egg, an egg from your fridge, so it still needs a bit more work, still too big, but we've got a basic shape going. So we're just going to kind of continue what we've been doing. So we're going to go back and forth from the bottom side to the top and just keep poking. And as our shape becomes more egg-like and more felted, you need to use a little more force at this point to get that needle into the center of the egg. So we don't just want the needle to stay on the outer part, we want it to be going into the egg. That way the middle will also be pretty solid. So if we don't poke in far enough, the outside gets well felted, but the inside can almost be rather hollow. So you still definitely need to get in there with the needle. And even though we want to poke a little more gently at the beginning, just to get our shaping going, so we're getting on to this point in our shaping, we can poke with a little more force. We really want to get that needle in there so that the whole thing will be nice and solid when we are finished. So hopefully you're getting an idea of how this goes. And you can always rewind the video if you want to see this again, how we're getting the shaping of the egg. And at this point, I'm thinking I will go ahead and speed up the video just to make it a little quicker to show you the rest of this shaping. And then we'll be ready to put on our whiter wool. And then after that, all of our colored designs. Alright, so we'll speed up now, and you can watch as I continue to finish up our egg shaping. Okay, so there we have our egg at this stage, and it's pretty good. It's still not perfect yet. Not that it will ever be completely perfect, but we're getting there. Still a little bigger also than some of my example eggs. So we still need to continue on with our felting, but at this point it is good enough to go ahead and put on our other wool. So this is the white batting that's in the kit called Harrisville Fleece, and we're just going to pull off pieces of it and wrap around the egg. So you can see I still have a little core wool showing through at the top and the bottom. So we're just going to wrap around and overlap this white. Actually, I probably have enough to cover the top, but we need just a little bit more for the bottom. So just pull off extra pieces if you need them and place them wherever you need them so that we cover all of the core wool. And then we're going to switch to our yellow tipped needle, a 40 triangle, and this is more of a finishing needle. It's not going to push the wool as much as our 36 did, but it's nicer for finishing. We won't have quite as many of the puncture holes, and this is just a good needle for where we are at this stage. So now I'm just going to poke all this down. So again, we just want to go over all of this. Just kind of tack it down to begin with, so it doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to get it attached. And then once we do have it all the way tacked on, we're going to keep going over the whole egg with this needle, and we want to smooth everything out and really perfect our shaping at this time. We want to felt with the needle here with our poking until the egg is nice and smooth, and this white is nice and flattened out so that we're not seeing many little fuzzy fibers sticking up. We want everything to be well felted onto the egg, well, becoming the egg. So as we did with the other needle when we were shaping with just the core wool, we need to go over the whole thing really a few times, back and forth, bottom and top, and just keep working all over the egg. Nice and smooth and rounded is what we're going for. And of course keeping our egg shape always in mind. So that's where we are right now, and I will go ahead and speed up again just to make this go a little faster, but you can continue to watch as I finish up all of the shaping and felting now that we've got our white on. So here we go. Okay, so here is where our egg is at. It's pretty much done. I'm just going to roll it a little here at the end. Sometimes I think this helps to round and smooth just a little bit, especially if you have a little moisture on your hands. Maybe get them wet and just roll a little bit and see how we're looking. So at this point you could even get an egg carton. That's where I'm keeping the rest of the eggs, and see if your egg fits. So our new one fits fairly well, and if I try to squish it, it can be squished just slightly, but not much. It's pretty solid. So that's how we want it to be. And now you will want to make the rest of your eggs, or if you're eager to decorate one, you could decorate one at a time or make all the eggs and then decorate at the end. So since I worked ahead and made all of my eggs ahead of time, we can go ahead and start decorating on the video. So I think we'll start with this egg. So this has the colors. You will want to find apple and apricot, pumpkin, and butternut. So pull out all of those colors, and then we will start with apple. So what we're going to do is put on our first little stripe of apple. So it's at the top of the egg, so figure out what is the bottom and what is the top. Hopefully you can tell on your egg. And then we're going to take the roving and pull a little thin line out, like so. And then we're going to lay it on the egg, again near the top. So lay it out on the egg where you want it to go. Try and make it straight, so it's going straight around. And then holding with your fingers in place, we're going to poke right on that line. And we need to go over it a few times, so up and back, right on that line. And then we're going to continue pulling roving out and try and just go all the way around the egg with this same piece. So you see I'm holding a little bit and pulling to lengthen out the line. Again, this takes a little bit of practice to get the feel for this. So if you happen to pull it all the way off, that's fine. We're just going to take the piece of roving and overlap it. And then here was the end that we started with that we did not quite poke down all the way. So we're just going to take the line and overlap where we started with the roving, so we can poke as we go. So I like to try and keep my roving kind of attached as I go along, but you can also just pull off these little pieces and overlap them and not have to deal with the bigger piece. So we're just poking over this line till all of this roving is attached. And sometimes there are little extra wispy bits that don't really want to get poked down, so just keep going over the line. And you can also take the needle and pull the fibers into place. Pull them onto the line. And if you have any very persistent pieces that just do not want to get poked down, what we can do at the end is take a scissors, and we'll probably wait till the very end, but I'll just show you that any extra fibers that are sticking up, we can take a scissors and just trim those off at the end. So you can see we've gotten a bit of an indent here where we put the line. So once we get all the colors on, if we're still having that, then we want to go back and poke down on either side of our lines, and we'll just shrink down the rest of the egg so that it's in line with the line. Alright, so we did our one stripe of red, and then we do a stripe of yellow that's a little bit wider. And of course you can kind of change these eggs if you have a different idea of the design that you would like on your eggs. That's totally fine. So I'm just going to do the design that I have created, but this can be changed to suit your personal preferences very easily. You can change which colors you're going in or the thickness of the lines, any of that. So this line is a little bit thicker, so we're just not going to pull it out as much into a thin line. We're going to leave it a little thicker when we put it on. So just get it how you want it to go and try and get it the right thickness. Looking at our original, and right up next to that red line. So hold in place and then just start poking. Again, watch out for your other fingers, of course, and back to that end and get that in place. So we're just going to go around just like we did with the red. So I'm going to hold and keep pulling the roving out to make my line. But if that's not working for you, you can just pull off a piece and work with a smaller piece as we go around. So also we don't want to cover up the red entirely. I want to keep the yellow just right next to it. So I'm using my needle again to just kind of pull the wool down to keep it off of that red. So right next to it, but not covering it up. And all the way around. And then at the end, I will hold and just pull off. And then this extra piece, we're just going to overlap. So that will be fine. There's always an overlap at the end. So just poking right on the yellow line. Sometimes you need to go over it 2 or 3 times to get it well attached and all the fibers poked in. Poke down. So that's what we have so far. So then we do another line of apple red, and then we're going to do a wider line of apricot, and then another wide line of butternut, then a line of pumpkin orange, and then one more apple. So these are all just put on the same way. You can go back and look at the way that I just put on these first 2 if you need to. And so I will speed up this part of the video as well as I put on the rest of these colors. And then we'll see where we're at with our egg shaping after that. Okay, now I have the stripes put on the egg, and at this point we just need to do some finishing touches. So there are a couple of areas where I see a little bit of white coming through, where I don't have the wool quite all the way filled in over the white. So the first thing to do after you get your stripes on is kind of go back and take a look at them and see if we want to do any fixing. So wherever there's a little white showing through, just make another thin line, and we just put it on the same way we've been doing all of these. So catch the end and then go over that line all the way to where the fibers end. So there's one little fix on this egg. And then, it's a little bit hard to see on the video, but we don't have a perfectly smooth egg anymore. So where we were poking all of our stripes on, the egg got poked extra, and you can see it's a bit indented in some places, and then the ends are not a smooth transition. They're popping out a little bit. So we're going to take our needle now and just go back over the ends and try and line them up and smooth everything out so the egg is got its nice shape back again. So it's a little bit thinner now, but we just need to poke at these ends so that they are in line with the rest of the egg. That makes sense. So we just want everything smoothed back out, no dips and no little parts popping out more than they should. So I will speed up one more time and just go ahead and finish this little bit of sculpting. Alright, so there is this egg. I'm feeling like it's pretty rounded and well sculpted everywhere. It is quite firm now, not much give to it, and we can see how it fits into our egg crate, and it fits in there pretty well. Alright, so now we are ready for another egg. Okay, next let's do our egg with dots on it. So we need to get the colors apricot and kiwi and lilac. So to do our dots, these go on kind of randomly, but they're fairly evenly spaced. So let's just pick a dot to start with. Let's get lilac. So how we're going to do these is we're going to pull off a little bit of wool and then roll it in your hands, and you can get a little bit of a wet rag or a sponge for this, and if your hands are dry, it can help for rolling if you have a little bit of moisture on your hands. So that just helps tangle our fibers up, and then I like to kind of fold the edges under. So hopefully you can see that. I've gotten a bit of a round dot started, and there are some long fibers that don't want to cooperate, so you may need to pull off some of those. Alright, but once you have a basic dot shape, we're just going to pick a spot on the egg then hold it down. Alright, so with these we want to go around the outside of the circle first. So I'm just going to take the needle and just kind of at an angle there, we're going to catch the very edge almost underneath. So just going around, and we want to try and make it nice and round. So again, you can take the needle, the very tip, and pull the wool if you need to, or push the wool to kind of get it where you want it to go. And then when we've gone around the whole edge, catching the edge, then we'll just poke straight down onto the top of our dot, going down into the egg a little bit. So there is the first dot. So I'll do one more so you can see that again, and then we'll probably speed up for the rest of the dots. So on this one, if we were doing this area, I'll probably put a green one here. So again, we're going to pull off just a little bit of wool. It's a little wispy piece. Then I like to roll it to kind of start it into a ball, like a round shape, tangle the fibers up, and then work it with your fingers a little bit to kind of fold and tuck till it is in a nice ball shape. And then pick a spot on the egg to put it. And then again, watching your other fingers, so we need to hold it a little bit. Actually, if you like to keep your fingers out of the way, you can tack it down with the needle, just poking it a few times to get it to stay on there. And then you can even have your other fingers well out of the way as you do the rest of the poking. So again, going around the outside first, catching the very edge. That's what you want to do. Making it nice and round, and then once all of the edges are poked down, then poke it flat. Poke around the rest of the dot kind of gently. We don't want to end up with indents wherever we have our dots. That's already happening a little bit, you can see. So we will need to go back over this at the very end to kind of round it all out again. So there's the next dot. So I will go ahead and speed up the video now so that you'll be able to watch all of the dots get put on, but it will go more quickly. And you can always rewind to see the technique for attaching and making your dots. One thing that I forgot to mention is that if you put on any dots that you don't like the look of once they are on, it is possible to pull them off. So I'm not going to pull this one off all the way, but you can see there I've got it all the way lifted up, and I could just yank it right off. So that is what to do if you feel like you've made a mistake or there are any that you don't like. Just pull them off and then redo. Alright, so I will continue on now and keep putting on dots. Alright, so there I finished putting on all the dots that I want, and in some cases you can see that our egg is not as rounded as we would like now, so it's kind of indented where we put the dots because extra poking happened there. So like with our first egg, I'm just going to go around and poke more on the white parts to kind of even everything up and smooth it out again so that our egg is equally rounded everywhere. So here we go with that. Alright, our egg is pretty well finished now, nicely rounded, and again, if there are any little extra fibers poking up that did not get all the way smoothed out, you can trim a bit with a scissors. Alright, so now we're ready for another egg. Alright, next let's do this egg. So we're going to need the colors blue raspberry, butternut, raspberry, and pink lemonade. So this egg is going to be very similar to the first egg that we did, except that we're going to have a wavy line and some little dots in the middle. So these are the same techniques we've already been doing on the previous eggs. So we're going to pull out a line of yellow, a fairly thin line, and this will go around at the top and at the bottom. So since you already know how to do lines, I will probably go ahead and speed up the video for these, and then we'll talk about how to do the middle once these lines are on. So top and bottom, and then two other lines of raspberry with a little bit of white in between them, and then we'll do the middle. Okay, so now I have those 4 lines on, and you can see our egg is a little indented again where the lines are, but we'll take care of that at the very end. So now to put on our curvy line, we're going to take our color Blue Raspberry and find a place to start. So I'm going to pick one of the top curves to poke down the end. See that? And then we're just going to lay the wool where we want it. There's the first curve. So just poke along with the needle, kind of moving the wool into place, into a curvy line, and we want to try to make it even. So we're headed back up now. So I'm going to try and hold it in place like that. And then just poke along the line. So up and then back down. Kind of moving the wool where we need it to go. Holding it with the other hand as well as pushing it with the needle or pulling it. And again, if this is not looking how you would like it to look, you can pull off your line and just try it again. There should be plenty of extra wool if you need to do that. And again, if you accidentally pull off your extra wool, just tack the end on again and continue on. So that is not really a problem. Just attach the end again and keep going. So I think I will speed up for this last part. The only other tricky thing is trying to get it to line up for the last one and still be even. So kind of once we round to this side of the egg, we'll need to kind of be looking ahead for how they're lining up at the end. But other than that, we're just going to continue on in the same way. Okay, there we have our curvy line all the way on. And now we just need to put these dots on. So there will be a dot in each little rounded part of the curve. So one here, one here, one here, one here. So this is with the pink lemonade color, and we just are going to do these the same way as our previous dots, but we're going to need even less wool. So pull off little pieces, and then this looks even a bit too big. So then I'm going to just tear off little bits if I've gotten the ball bigger than I want it, and roll again. And you may want some moisture on your hands for this, I think this ball is still slightly big, so I'm going to tear off a bit more. It's kind of hard to get the exact amount of wool. So just play around with it until you get a dot that will fit in our little rounded area of our curvy line. And then I'm catching the edges again first. So get the edges and then poke down all over the middle of the dot. And there it is. Alright, so I will speed up again, just re-watch if you need to see how to make these little dots. But the key is just to have the right amount of wool. So you may need to tear off some, or if you get too little wool, then just, take off another little tiny piece and add it on to your ball till you get your ball the right size so that it fits in our little design here. Alright, so I will speed up now and finish this up, and then we'll just have our last smoothing and shaping that we need to do. Okay, so I've got on all of the pink dots. So now all we need to do is just go back over the whole egg and work on the shaping again so that we smooth it out and have nice uniformity. So we don't want these little dips where our extra colors are. We don't want the little white parts popping out. So we'll just go ahead and poke on the white parts again and poke on any dots that are kind of too rounded. So just smoothing the whole egg. Alright, so this egg is looking finished. So we'll be on to the next. Alright, the next egg that we will work on is this blue and green one with the, I guess what we'll call a chevron pattern, a line in the middle, and then filled in parts on the top and bottom. So for this one we will need the colors Huckleberry, Mint Julep, and Blue Raspberry. So the first part we will put on will be the Huckleberry blue in the middle. So that line is what we're going to do first. So again, pull out the wool so you have a thinner line of it, and then we're going to pick where we want to start. So we want this design to be in the middle of the egg. So trying to get right in the middle there. So we're going to do this angle, and then we'll be pulling the wool up and down, but keeping things very straight, unlike our last wavy line. So now going up, trying to keep everything nice and straight. So poke this down, and then when we get to the top point, poke where that top point will be, and then we're going to pull the wool down. So from that top point, head it down, again trying to be nice and straight. And when we get to where this point will be, poke a little extra there, and then we pull the wool back up. So that's how we are going around for this egg. Same thing over and over until we get around to the beginning where we started. So again, the only thing to keep in mind as we near the start, we want to try and be able to keep our design even. So just be conscious of where we started and fitting in the design as evenly as possible, but ending up at the start. So we'll just speed this last little part up a little bit to get this finished, and then we can work on the ends of the egg. Alright, there we have our chevron pattern, and it's not perhaps perfectly perfect, but it's good enough. So hopefully yours is as well. So now we're going to put on the blue raspberry color at the top. So here's what it will look like. So we're going to fill this in, and it ends up looking like kind of a star shape there at the top. So to do that, we're going to make a line around that mimics the blue one we already put on, and then we'll fill in at the top. So find a place to start another line, and then we're going to follow our blue line. So up and down the very same way. And once we get this line in, then we're going to fill in the white at the top. So again, trying to stay straight with this line and keep kind of an even amount of white there in between. So I'll speed this up to get this initial line in, and then we'll see about filling in the rest. Alright, there you can see we've got in our initial line, and then it got a little thin at the end, but that won't matter because we're just going to be filling in everything. So I'm not even going to pull this off, I'm just going to leave the wool attached, although if you have pulled it off, that is fine, and just start another line. Just attach the end of your roving and we will start filling in. So we're just going to pull the wool down into the spaces we need it. So taking the needle and just pulling it where we want it to go. And then back up here. So we're just going to take the wool and fill in all of this white at the top. So you can see how that's going. We're just going to keep moving around, filling in, and poking down as we go. And we can lengthen it out a bit if you've got too much wool there to be pushing and pulling. So we can go over this as much as we need to. See there, we're almost all the way filled in. And we don't want any white to show through, but if any white is showing through, we can always go back at the end and fill in the little gaps with some extra pieces. Alright, so I'm going to pull off now, and then we have an end, and I'm just going to kind of move that wherever it looks like I have any little spots that are needing a little extra wool, and just keep poking until that end is all attached somewhere. Just going over that to make sure we've got it all. So there it is. And we're going to do the very same thing on the other side, on the bottom. So that's with our color called Mint Julep. So again, now that you've seen one side, the other side is going to go the same way. So I will just speed this up and you can just watch as I fill in the bottom. Okay, so this egg has its colors on. So the only thing left, just like all the other ones, is to go over the white parts again and smooth everything out so we get back to our nice smoothed egg shape. Alright, so we'll call this egg finished. Alright, 2 eggs left, so let's go ahead and do this one, which is our rainbow spiral. So I really like this egg, I think it's pretty cool. And the colors we will need are apple and pumpkin, butternut, kiwi, huckleberry, and lilac. So I like to start on the bottom with apple. So you see what we're shooting for is to get a nice even spiral. It spirals up the egg to the top, and then we're going to switch out colors as we go. So let's take apple and let's pull out a thin line. So we're making a line again, just like we've done before, but instead of it going straight around or up and down or wavy, it's going to spiral. So find what you think is the middle of the egg, and we're going to poke the end of this apple right into the middle. Get it well tacked down, and then decide which way you would like to spiral. So we're going to start by pulling the wool into place and have it thin enough. And again, I like to do it leaving the rest still attached, but you can do it with small pieces if you prefer. So I've just poked down that first little curve, and then we're just going to continue on around. So I like to get the wool into place first and then poke that whole area with the needle. Go over it a couple times. And so we're just going to be continuing on with this red color a little bit farther. I need to spiral out. And at this point, I will go ahead and let the end pull off. So this is where we will be adding on our pumpkin color, but we need to finish poking all of this red down. So we're just going to continue on in our spiral shape, and it gets thinner at the end, but that's what we want it to do. That's part of the design. So it's hard to do. The very tip gets very thin, but that's how it will look. And then we're going to get our pumpkin color and pull out a thin line. And then this is going to go back, and the end of pumpkin is going to overlap starting where our apple color got thin. So we want them to overlap, and that's how the colors fade into each other. So continuing on, we're going to go around, maybe go around the egg once with this pumpkin color. So pulling out carefully as we go and lining it up where we want it to be. Alright, taking a look at the original. Alright, so at this point we're getting back to where pumpkin started. So we've gone around the egg once, and I will tear off now. But even so, we need to poke this all the way to the end where it gets thin. So poking all the way to the end if possible. And then we'll get our butternut color. Find a good end. So pulling out thin again, we're going to overlap this just the same way. Figure out where we need to start. We'll get to the end, and it will overlap the pumpkin just a little bit. So poke at the end, and then we continue on with our yellow. So again, we'll just go around once till we get back to where the yellow started. And then we'll put on green, blue, and purple, going in rainbow order. So the same way, we'll just continue on up the egg. And I will go ahead and speed this up. And again, we're just putting them on the same way, continuing our spiral till we get to the tip at the top of the egg. Alright, so here we are at the very end, and there's some little purple strands, little fibers still that are not attached and hard to get in at the end. So I'm just gonna kind of fold them back on themselves and just go back around the spiral, tucking in these last little ones, or you could trim them off. I'm gonna fold them back and try and tuck them in. Alright, there we have it, and you see our egg needs a little bit of sculpting help again, just like all the other ones. So we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, we have this egg pretty well smoothed out, looking good. So for our last egg, we're going to do this one with these pretty little pink flowers on it. So for this one, we will need mint julep, kiwi, pink lemonade, and raspberry. So the first thing we will put on is a line right around the middle of the egg in mint julep. So now you are probably a pro at lines. Just gonna put this one right around the middle, and I will speed up so that you can see this, but we'll get it done quickly. Okay, so now we have our mint julep line around the center. So now we are going to put in our little kiwi stems for the flowers. So they're just little, about a centimeter perhaps long, little stems, and they're going to go right around the egg. So, and we want to space them pretty evenly so that our flowers are spaced evenly. So for these, I like to do what we did for the little balls and get a little piece. I had to tear off some because it was still too big. And I think it's still too big, so we want to get a little piece about like that, and I'm rolling it, and now rolling it a little more like a snake so that it's a little stem piece. And then we're going to angle it and poke the ends. And then poke down the stem like that. And so we can go ahead and put these on all the way around, again getting little pieces of kiwi and turning them into little stems, and we're going to space them about an inch apart. So all the way around the egg. So this one was on this side, now we're going to the other side. So they're staggered back and forth. Like that. And then we're also going to put a leaf next to each stem. So on the right side, when it's on this side, on the left side, when it's on this side, we're going to put a little leaf, also done in mint julep. So here's our mint julep, and these are also pretty small, so I needed to tear a little off. And so we make it into a little leaf shape by rolling, and still might be too big. These need to be pretty small, so I just tore off a little bit more. So there we go. And you can also shape it with your needle. So poke the ends, and then we want the end to be in a point, both ends really, and then kind of a rounded leaf shape, like that. So we're going to put one on the other side of the other stem that we have. So we have a little leaf by this stem as well. You can see how they're staggered, alternating sides. Alright, so you can do that all the way around, or we could go ahead and do the flowers for these. So however makes more sense to you. So for the flowers, look at our original here, we're going to have 6 little dots that are pink lemonade. So the same way we made our dots before, we're going to make 6 little dots for our flower petals, and then put 1 dot of raspberry in the middle. So we can start out with the dot of raspberry so that we will know where our middle is. So again, this needs to be quite small. I already need to tear some, but we could keep the other one for the next center. So this is going to go right up above our stem, and just poke it right in. And then we're going to make our 6 little dots, little petals. And they can be mostly round, but they could be a little more oval shaped if you can do that. Hopefully you can see that on the example. So once we get a little dot ready, little petal, I'm going to try and poke right into each end. So these do not take a whole lot of poking, just some deliberate stabs to get it attached right at the ends, and maybe one on each side. So just continue. I already had another petal from the one that I tore off, so I can put that on. So a little stab at the end right by the center, and a stab up the end. So we're just going to continue making these little tiny petals from our little wispy pieces of pink lemonade. And they just take some deliberate stabs to get them attached. So one right by the center and one at the other end. So hopefully you can see that. So that's what we're going to do. Put 6 of these little petals on and then continue on around the egg, trying to keep these rather evenly spaced, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch apart. So I will go ahead and speed up the video and you can watch the rest of that. Okay, so I have all the flowers in, and now we will just go over it all again, trying to smooth out. This one's a little trickier because we had to stab so hard to get our little tiny pieces attached, so it might not end up quite as smooth as some of the other eggs, but we'll see what we can do. So here we go with that. Alright, so there's our egg with the little flowers all finished. So let's bring all the eggs back now so you can see finished ones. There they are. So I hope you enjoyed making this kit, and if you are in need of any felting supplies or want to check out any of our other kits, I hope you'll visit us at feltedsky.com. So as always, happy felting!